Hey, I need a job. Can you help me find one? I'm also looking for a place to call home. Could you help me put some food on the table tonight? And you know, I'm a little lonely these days. Would you like to be friends? But what if I told you that I've been to prison? What's going through your mind now? Do you still care about my needs? Do I still have your trust? Am I still worthy of your compassion? And I get how you might feel right now. Many of us at some point were taught to be fearful of those who have been to jail or prison. The narrative that many of us grew up believing is that they're beyond hope and never to be trusted again. In general, we treat jails and prisons like a trash can for humanity, discarded, out of sight, out of mind, and even for those who do re-enter society, we interact with them at arm's length. And for dangerous and violent criminals, that fear and mistrust is well placed. But for those who are not, even when they've done the hard work to overcome their past choices and rehabilitate, they're not truly free. Instead, they're met with what feels like a second sentence and caught in this nebulous web of collateral consequences that restricts their ability to find true stability. The reason this matters to me is because while I have not been to jail or prison, I have close family members who have. Dealing with the legal system is not just exhausting and dehumanizing for the accused, but also for their families. I know what it's like to see a loved one be treated as less than human, even after they've already served their time, received an education, and are working hard to stand on their own 2 feet. And that is a burden I shoulder with my family every day. This experience is what planted the seed for the story I'm going to share with you today. In my second year as a photojournalist, I pitched my first long-form photo essay to document participants in a new program called Freed Texas. Freed stands for Finish Recidivism Through Education, Employment, and Divinity. It's a 9-week course designed to give participants the education, resources, counseling, and funding they need to stay out of jail and prison. And that is where I met 3 people who changed my life. Ken Dixon, Camille Campos, and Maria Avila said yes to this program in the summer of 2023. Over the course of 12 weeks, they welcomed me to nestle into their lives and follow them closely, both inside and outside the classroom. They invited me into their homes. They introduced me to their children, their parents, their partners. We shared meals together, and they also shared their stories with me. They opened up about the painful and often trauma-filled moments of their lives that it led to incarceration and battles with addiction. Ken, Camille, and Maria have spent more than 52 years behind bars combined. And even when they worked through the challenges of their past choices to rehabilitate, what they taught me is that how different their stories would have and could still be if only they were met with more compassion in our community. Let me introduce you to Ken, Camille, and Maria. Ken Dixon's childhood started out pretty normal. He grew up in San Antonio, and his life was adorned with football, comic books, band, theater. But then his family moved in the mid to late 90s to the Lincoln Heights courts on San Antonio's west side, where he was exposed to rampant gang activity. He shared with me that even members of his own family taught him the ropes of gang culture. At 12 years old, Ken purchased his first car. At 13, he was making $5,000 a week dealing drugs with other gang members. Where were his parents? His father was in prison, and his mother, who was dealing with her own trauma, was shouldering an addiction that took her attention away from parenting. Ken experienced his first stint of incarceration when he went to juvenile detention for being caught driving underage. And he told me that he knew it wasn't a matter of if he was going to go to prison, but when. Living off of food stamps and other government subsidies, He had to learn how to fend for himself and provide for himself, and he had to grow up fast, and unfortunately that did include crime. And sure enough, when he was only 20 years old, he was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison, and he got out after 8 years on parole in 2014. When Camille Campos was 9 years old, she moved to San Antonio with her family from Corpus Christi, and she remembers seeing her mom working hard to provide for her and her siblings. But eventually, Camille's older sister started to coerce Camille to try drugs, and this is how they both coped with childhood sexual assault trauma. Camille started skipping school, smoking weed, drinking, and she said her life just spiraled out of control. And these self-medicating measures followed her into adulthood and into motherhood. Camille's 3 oldest children watched their mom battle an addiction for years, which caused a rift in their relationship. In 2015, when Camille was 37 years old, she started using meth. And at first, she was able to hide it from the father of her 2 youngest children, but eventually when he found out, he took custody of the kids and moved them back to California, and this turned her world upside down. And she was sentenced to 4 years of probation on a 2021 felony possession charge, and she got out on bond after spending 2 days in Bexar County jail. And she told me a distinct moment that she knew something had to change. She said she was in her room one day using, and God spoke to her and said, "Your kids don't get to self-medicate. They have to feel the pain of not having their mother every single day." And on August 12th, 2022, she took herself to detox to begin her sobriety journey. Maria Avila grew up in a big family. She was the youngest of 10 children. And she shared with me a really important story that changed her life forever. Maria was sexually assaulted by her stepbrother. And when she finally mustered up the courage to confide this in her mother chose to protect him instead. And this ripped Maria's heart to pieces. When she was 15 years old, she ran away from home, started injecting intravenous drugs, and had her child all in the first year. Between 1989 and 2009, Maria accrued a long list of charges. In addition to being in and out of jail, she also went to prison 5 different times over the span of 4 decades. And then, during her last prison sentence, she was fighting yet another battle. She received the devastating news that her youngest child, Celia Lopez, was murdered. And Maria still had 5 years left on her prison sentence, so she wasn't able to properly bury or grieve her child. And this was the moment she knew something has to change. And I hope that what you can see is that the through line through each of their stories is that delinquency was a result of their circumstances and not a product of their heart. What is a child to do when they don't have protection, security, guidance, all while being steeped in an environment that is often unbecoming and dangerous, and then being sent to jail or prison where very little is being done to help them heal from physical and emotional trauma? And while Ken, Camille, and Maria have been able to overcome a lot of the consequences from their past choices, the reality that met them on the other side was like another sentence, or as my father calls it, prison after prison. Gabriel Chen said it well in his research paper published in the Academy for Justice. For those convicted of a crime, the greatest impact will not be imprisonment, but being marked as a criminal and subjected to collateral consequences. Collateral consequences include such crucial things, such as losing access to housing benefits, health benefits, being able to find stable employment with a livable wage. Sometimes those with convictions can face voting restrictions, you can be barred from holding certain elected offices, and you can even lose your Second Amendment right, just to name a few. But the Council of State Governments Justice Center has counted more than 40,000 collateral consequences, which vary from state to state and are largely unregulated. Even things you wouldn't think about, like you can be kicked off of a dating app, or be prevented from renting on Airbnb, or even lose access to federal housing assistance, which disproportionately impacts those facing homelessness because often they have criminal trespass charges, which could be just as simple as sitting or sleeping on a bench you were told not to. So what can we do? One solution is getting your record expunged. In 2021, the Bexar County District Attorney's Office launched its Second Chance for Success program, which helps those with arrest and misdemeanor convictions get their record expunged and get support services. But it is often a lengthy and costly process. And the thing is, because your record can follow you for your entire life, even across state lines, getting your record expunged can be like getting a second lease on life. But generally, only arrests and charges can be expunged, not convictions, which means that roughly half of those who are seeking expungement, or the people who need it most, can't get it. Another solution is the ban the box policy. In 2016, the city of San Antonio enacted its ban the box policy, which removes questions about criminal history from city job applications. Nationally, 37 states have enacted this policy, and only 15 employ this policy in the private sector. I loved what this local attorney with Easy Expunctions said. He said, "Wouldn't it be better public policy to not foreclose hope on people?" While Ken, Camille, and Maria have achieved so much, they are still facing an uphill battle. Today, Ken coaches a nonprofit youth football team, which gives kids in the same neighborhood that he grew up in a real alternative. Last summer, I got to watch Camille celebrate her first year of sobriety, and now she has a job, yes. And now she has a job with the harm reduction team at Corazon Ministries. And Maria finally gets to be the mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother that she always wanted to be. And while she shared with me that she is still struggling to hold housing and a stable job, she's not giving up. While working on this story, I felt the weight of my privilege. It's easy to judge someone, but it's harder to have compassion, because compassion takes curiosity, and curiosity takes work. However it is you are navigating this life, maybe with the student at school that's always getting in trouble, or maybe you're a hiring manager, or the patients you see in your doctor's office or at your law firm, or maybe the barista who makes your coffee every morning, or maybe the person you're sitting next to right now. You don't know if they're carrying this burden. And I hope that you won't just write them off or judge them or label them, but instead seek to understand where they've come from, where they're going, and what you can do to help them get there. I get it. It's second nature for us to want to put up these barriers that we think are designed to protect us from the bad guy and keep us insulated from harm. But sometimes what we're actually doing is limiting others' ability to be seen as human and be able to access the very resources they need to progress. We can change that narrative with compassion. Compassion is not just a cute word. It's a game changer, a mountain mover, and a destroyer of barriers. Thank you.